evening, folks. It's our pleasure to have you with us this evening, and welcome to the launch of Unlikely. We had a great night in person here in Melbourne, and so hello to any of the folks that may have been there as well. And we're very aware that for a national business like this, we're certainly going to have folks all around the country, and so we wanted to do a double header. We had our in-person last night, and we wanted to do an online piece tonight. I want to begin by acknowledging ARC Publishers who've done great work in helping us get to this point. Tonight's going to be a short, sharp 1 hour session. We're going to certainly hear from Jason and get a real sense of some of the kind of behind the scenes of kind of this journey. One of the things that we'll do towards the second half is I'll be doing a question and answer section with Jason. And whilst I certainly have plenty of questions that can carry us through tonight, I think what would make it really interesting is if you were submitting questions. And so you can do that through Zoom. At the bottom of your Zoom window, you're going to find two links. There's a chat link and a Q&A. You have to use the Q&A piece. If you use that, then I'll be able to see your questions, and we'll try and get through as many of those as we can tonight. As many of you will know, this is actually not Jason's first book. I'll grab some of the other ones tonight. We're also releasing the second edition of his earliest book, Get Yourself Back in Motion, which is a health and wellness guide from the physio perspective, along with Jason's excellent leadership book, Outside In, Downside Up. And so all of those, including our star book tonight, Unlikely, can be purchased either from Amazon or from Jason's website. And so I think we've popped the link address for Jason's website into the chat channel. And if you buy from that, there's a code launch10 that'll get you a discount. But also by buying through the website, if you'd like to, you can request a comment and feedback and a hello signed by Jason in the book. So take advantage of that if you'd like to. A couple of thoughts as just before I get the man of the hour up to talk to us. It can make you almost feel sick. Jason's good at a lot of stuff, and it turns out he's also very good at writing. So the book is certainly a great read. And I think for a lot of you watching tonight, you may have a kind of the similar experience I had when I was one of the pre-readers, which is it's really interesting to read a book that's both well written, but that you were actually a part of that journey, and you got to be a part of that. And so I've never had that in my life before. I've read great books of people on the other side of the world, but I think you're going to enjoy the opportunity to read something where kind of you participated in that process. We've had some incredibly positive feedback in the pre-reading. Tim Costello says it's a hard book to put down. Craig Winkler, the founder of MyOb and major investor in Xero, calls it chest tightening, reality of risking everything. The head of the Australian Physiotherapy Association calls it streetwise and visionary, and the list goes on. So we've had great early feedback on it, and I'm really confident you're going to enjoy it as well. But enough of me. The gentleman that we've come here to see tonight is Jace. So Jason, come on up, my friend. Mate, it is excellent to see you, my friend. And mate, I'd love you to kick us off tonight. Give us a little bit of background and maybe some readings and bits and pieces as we go through.
Yeah. Well, thanks for tuning in. And I do feel like we have lured you in a little under false pretenses. It's clearly a book launch. There's no shying away from that. But when Paulina and I were thinking about how we wanted to present the book to our workforce, to our peers, to the industry at large, actually the thing we mostly wanted to do was acknowledge everybody who was a part of the story. So yeah, I'll get onto the book in a minute. But firstly, I want you to know that whether you made a big contribution or whether you made a seemingly small one, they were all the jigsaw puzzle pieces of Back in Motion. And it was 22 years. So we had over 3,000 physios, osteos, podiatrists, exercise physiologists. I mean, there are a lot of people who wore our burgundy uniform with pride. We had over 1 million clients who were loyal to our brand, patients who referred their own friends and family. We had suppliers, we had advisors, we had family who stood by us when it was tough. And so it might be my mug on the front of the book, but really the heroes of the story are everybody who made those contributions along the way, because like all businesses, Back in Motion was a team sport. And I think that's a really great place to start tonight. As far as the book itself goes, I don't feel like I have a lot to say in terms of the story itself, because I feel like I've kind of said it all in the book. It's a pretty thick book.
It's a beefy volume.
It kind of almost doubles as a step for the kitchen to reach the high cupboards or a monitor stand or something. But I don't really want to speak to the story. Sure. Maybe in the Q&A, some of that will come out. But as far as writing the book goes, yesterday, literally to the day, was the 3rd anniversary since Paulina and I sold Back in Motion. And so that's a pretty sentimental date to have released the book, and not by accident, but really it's taken me all of that 3 years to gather my thoughts and try and tell the story in a way that I think is meaningful to people. Literally on the first morning after we sold the business, so this is 3 years ago, I just went to my desk like I did every day for 22 years and momentarily had nothing to do. Like, we'd sold the business. I didn't have a job anymore. And I felt disorientated. I wasn't quite sure what I should do. And in that little vacuum of moments, I started to just journal some thoughts, some lessons from all the years, the good times, the tough times. I started to write out some prayers. I started to try and distill, what did I learn from this crazy adventure, this chaotic story? And when Paulina learned that I was starting to jot some things down, she said to me, "Do it for the kids." And by that, what she means is our kids, like our children. They were either not yet born or were way too young to have appreciated the complexity of the journey and appreciate the extremes of some of the experiences. Of course, they saw the tail end of it, but they didn't see everything that goes on at the beginning and in what I call in the book the ugly middle. And so I kind of committed at that point to starting to put much more structured thought into how I could tell the story so that our kids could find it meaningful for them. And after 2 years of researching and writing and collecting anecdotes and embarrassing gaffes and real regrets about some of the decisions I had made and things that had happened, and almost making an inventory of the hard times and some of the really rewarding moments, I had over 1,000 pages of a pretty scary story. And it was about then that I thought, maybe if I gave it to a few lawyers to make it safe, not get me in trouble, and we edited it back to a slightly more readable version, maybe it's suitable for a wider audience where you too could learn some of my mistakes and learn from my experience, and maybe it adds to the industry that I've given all of my working life to. So that's kind of the origins of the book.
Yes.
2 years of research and writing, 6 months of editing. It's harder to cut words out than add to them. And about 6 months of publishing gets us to where we are tonight. And it's kind of mixed feelings.
Yes.
Like, there is definitely some relief to have it out there. Gratitude to everybody, like I've already spoken to. And not insignificantly, some terror, like absolute fear. Because, once it's out there, there's no pulling it back.
Yeah, okay.
And I've written a book on leadership. I've written a book on healthcare. It's kind of in the third person.
Yes.
But this is something more of a memoir.
Yeah, this is you.
This is the story of the Back in Motion group, but it's really the personal story. It's the inner feelings. Most people aren't privy to what goes on in the hearts and the minds of entrepreneurs and people who take risks, and even family who kind of walk in parallel with you. They think they know, close colleagues think they know, but I had lunch with someone today who's just started the read because they got a book last night, and they're like, wow, there's some stuff I just would never have known. And so it's a little scary to put it out there, but I hope that you will find it interesting, meaningful. And the good thing is, if at any point you want to skip over some stuff, you do that at your leisure.
Yeah.
If you literally want to slam the cover in my face, you can do that, and you can just read the bits that are suitable to you.
And it's pretty brutally honest too.
I think so.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, look, rather than me tell the story, what's pretty traditional at a book launch is to give some selected readings. And I didn't plan this, but after I had written the book and edited it down and handed it over to the publisher, and they started all the marketing conversations, they said to me, Jace, what are the themes? Like, how do we tell your story in a few words?
Yeah.
And I kind of only realized then that there's these three threads running from chapter 1 all the way to the end.
Yes.
And they are the themes of faith, family, and the dirty F word of franchising. So they're kind of the three pillars that make up the story that I tell. So I thought what I'd do is just give a short passage on each of those themes, give you a little tasting plate of, if you choose to read the book, what's to come. And that'll at least introduce you to some of what's ahead.
Yeah,
so
great.
That's how I'm thinking to approach it before we get into some of the questions. So if I was to start with the faith theme, I think we all have a worldview. We all have a belief in something. Far be it from me to decide what you should believe in, but I'm very clear on what I believe in. And it's taken me up until this point in my life still to keep distilling, discerning, trying to clarify what that is. But I want to read you just a short passage in the first half of the book. The book is split into 4 sections, 4 epochs. And this first passage is me as a 26-year-old. So I won't follow chronological order, but this is me at 26 years of age. I think you'll pick up the journey pretty quickly. I call it my quarter life crisis, and I think you'll hear why. Paulina and I are on a trip around Australia, pretty well running away from the early stages of our business. So throughout our trip, I made various entries into a personal journal, revealing a clear insight into my disturbed state of mind and heart at this really low point in my life. I was down on myself for having let the busyness of the practice overwhelm me, displacing all of my spiritual disciplines I had previously been committed to. I was surprised how far I had slipped and how quickly it had happened. Like a wayfaring vessel with a damaged keel and a snapped mast, I found myself adrift, utterly devoid of direction. And this is the journal entry on the 13th of November 2001 that I'll just read in part. I feel lost. It is now 2 weeks since I left my busy work schedule, my regimented lifestyle, to go on holidays and rediscover God again. But it hasn't happened. Gee, I am lost. How did I get here so fast? And why hadn't I read or followed all the road signs along the way? I can remember a day not that long ago when my future in God was as reliable as tomorrow's sun. The joy of his presence was like 3 square meals a day, feeding my soul. At one point, I felt like I knew God. I was probably only 15 years old then. Today, I'm 26. Really old, right? Today, I'm 26 years old, but a shell of that boy, a hastily disappearing shadow of him, or at least my memory of that boy. And I close out, in the book, I close out that journal's entry with this really dreary conclusion. Whilst I really don't know what to believe, I can't ignore that for the last 2 years, I have been going to sleep at night and waking the next morning with the nagging, grievous thought that somewhere along the line, I have missed it. And by that I mean I've turned a wrong corner, I've ignored a clear sign, I've failed to make a right step, I've obviously chosen a wrong path that has led to my loss of direction. I am indeed lost. And my only hope is that God hasn't lost me yet. That's my thread to hang on to at this point.
It's good.
So that's one of my journal entries as a 26-year-old in the first few chapters of the book, which I think really sets a scene from a faith point of view, that this isn't like I have always had a confidence that I knew what was happening, that I knew what God was doing, that my faith was always strong. I think this reveals that lots of questions, lots of moments of hopelessness, wondering, Not sure. I mean, hence the title, unlikely.
Have I screwed it up?
Well, as you read it, I think you'll pick up like the intersections, the moments of where my faith is strong. You'll hear when it's weak again, and I think it's this rhythm that you follow through my story because it's the true story, and I wouldn't want people to know anything else. But I would say this because you kind of know the end anyway. I'd say this. God has proven himself faithful over and over again. And so in the times where I thought he wasn't there, it was a reflection of more my state than I think of any reflection on him.
He's faithful.
And so my faith has grown, it has got stronger, but it is a journey, definitely a journey. So that's theme one. If I was picking up the second theme, family, like we've already acknowledged, you can't achieve anything of significance without people around you.
Yeah.
And we wouldn't want to underestimate anyone's success as being an individual pursuit. So let me just give you a couple of quick thoughts. This comes from a chapter really inappropriately titled Vomitus. Nice. So that hopefully, sparks a little bit of curiosity in your mind. We won't touch on that aspect, but it's in that chapter. And I'm back in time now. I'm 21 years of age. I've just come back from my very first overseas trip as a temporary short-term missionary, and this is what happens. Only weeks back from my first experience in Cambodia, I felt something stirring in my heart, knotting my stomach, in fact, making me weak in the knees. And the source of my angst was a girl. So I first met Paulina in grade 5 at Waverley Christian College, where we shared a class together. A year apart, me being the older, of course, she would enjoy asserting for the remainder of our lives together. We hadn't seen each other since I left school in year 10. But I was looking at her now, 5 years later, and I saw something that I had previously overlooked. Noticeably shorter than most of her peers, Paulina stood tall on personality. She was beautiful beyond description. She was famed in our friendship group for her captivating round eyes, her charming dimples, that warm, inviting smile. She was from Chilean descent, but born in Brazil. She immigrated to Australia as a 10-year-old. She didn't know a single word of English when she arrived, and so she had already overcome a lot. And yet it seemed that she succeeded at almost everything she did. Gregarious in all the ways I wasn't, Paulina drew me into her force field of laughter, energy, and conversation. And I'm only human, of course. I couldn't resist. So this is a bit of a love story as well. And if I just sort of pick up a little bit of that family theme towards the second half of the book, let me just keep going. Paulina was my ideal complement, not just in business, but in every facet of life. Together we were a powerful alloy. Her accomplishments leave me awestruck. She is hardworking, she is resilient, she cares deeply about the spaces she invests into. She has always had an innate sense of the glass balls that need catching and the rubber ones that could bounce in the high wire circus act that had become our lives. But the personal commitments to family and business and her responsibilities to our charity left her very little bandwidth for much else. Unwilling to do things in half measures, Paulina sensed the inevitability of letting her nursing registration lapse, something she had tried to maintain to this point, keeping her career options open. It was a solemn moment when it eventually happened, unlikely to ever return to a profession she had given most of her adult life. And as Paulina let that significant part of her identity drift away, it was a little like watching a treasured page of her personal journal float downstream, eventually carried out of sight by the gentle current. And I finish this chapter by saying, it is unlikely I will ever fully know the personal cost of all of Paulina's sacrifices. And so I think with this theme of family, what we learn is that everybody, there's a tax on everybody. Like entrepreneurship and risk-taking and just hard work, it does rely on a whole team of people. And I think my reflection, even as I write and finish the book and look back, is those closest to you probably pay the higher price.
Yeah.
And so we wouldn't be anywhere if it wasn't for family. And then let me just pick up this last theme of franchising, if I can find it. Well, it looks like I've lost my bookmark in here. Just give me a second to see if I can quickly grab it.
Whilst you're doing that, let me just remind folks, there is the Q&A section, and we've got a couple of questions that have come through, but yeah, love a few more for our section that we'll do in a moment.
All right, let me just give you a short section on franchising. Of course, this is the business model. We chose to scale the group across Australia and New Zealand. Yeah, we joke the dirty F word. It's hadn't been done really in healthcare well, especially not in allied healthcare. And so we were a black sheep for a long time. Let me just pick up a little window in time of life behind the desk, running the Back in Motion Health Group. This is 2015. By the close of that year, 2015, I was cooked. My schedule was oversubscribed in 15-minute increments, a chaotic tapestry woven with discordant threads of appointments, obligations, and commitments begging for attention. The online calendar managed by my assistant, once a primitive white or pristine white canvas, had every square teeming with an intricate mosaic of color-coded engagements. Management meetings, interstate flights, video conferences with remote teams, new practice launches, charity outreach missions, the Iceberg leadership masterclasses, crisis management with troublesome franchisees. I even worked that year alongside our local church, helping them transition in some aspects of leadership. And if all this wasn't enough, we were traversing complexities of family life, of me turning 40, you know, the cliche midlife. We were sleeping in a rental property because we had sold our family home to keep the business afloat. Every day unfolded like a frantic symphony, a cacophony of urgent emails, high-stake decisions, blurring the lines between the urgent and the important, and each block of time a battlefield for competing priorities that seemed to shrink under the weight of unyielding expectations, leaving little room for spontaneity and respite. What a positive picture.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, so that's just a day in the life of a CEO of a physiotherapy group that tried to become national. And so, you know, franchising had lots of rewards. It had lots of amazing moments of fulfillment, but it was a blood sport at times as well, as we just tried to keep our head above water. And I think I'm pretty raw when I write about, I guess, the moments, the near death, the near misses, as we journeyed the group. And there's plenty of those. So I'll leave you on that little cliffhanger, because it's a recurring tension all the way through the book that frankly we don't resolve till we get to some pretty full closure at the end. So
at the end of it.
Look, it is a long book. I hope you enjoy it. As I said, I'm a little nervous, but I want your honest reviews. If there were a couple of things I'd love you to take away, number one would be please regard this as the real story. Like, a lot of people think they know the story, but until, I guess, you get a peek behind the curtain, you make lots of assumptions. We can make our lives look much prettier than they really are. So this is the authentic story.
You don't look good in all of it. There's plenty you don't.
Buckle up. I think I admit more faults in here than I have in the totality of my working life up to this point. So this is the real story. The second thing would be, I hope it does encourage you. Like, I hope it inspires you. I hope it compels you to take a few more risks than you might ordinarily take, because I think I proved pretty well, if I'm a case study of one, that the most unlikely of candidates can still leave a little dent in their world. But thirdly, mostly, I want you to hear the God story. I really do, because it's not the Jason story. Jesus is the hero. And I know that's not always popular and it can make you squirm a little bit, but it is the truth. I really think God is the one who kept every promise, who got us from here to there. And I don't say that glibly. So I hope that really lands well with you, regardless of what you choose to do with it. I hope you hear that.
Yeah, great, excellent. Thanks, mate. That's fantastic. And as I said, we did an event last night, and I think actually the thing that made last night really work was that Paulina agreed to come and join us. And so just in terms of, I just think it's a really important perspective. So Pauls, I would love it if you would come and join us again this evening. And I'm gonna do our Q&A kind of across the two of you. Thank you to the folks who put questions in, and certainly happy to take some more as well. And Jason, a good friend of mine, said, Ben, you can ask the hard questions. You know, you can.
Why not?
And I think it makes it interesting, and even wanting to have questions kind of without notice. And so, as is certainly some of these, I think, you know, they say that one of the hard parts about being kind of an entrepreneur or the CEO of something that's growing and actively sort of, you know, taking ground is you've got that challenge that there's a whole bunch of things that you do, and when you do them, it's the first time you do them.
Yeah.
And you know, everybody thinks that why can't you do all these things? And it's like you're doing them for the first time as well. When did you most feel out of your depth?
Yeah. Probably Monday through Sunday. You know, I felt ill-equipped pretty well from the beginning.
Yeah.
I describe myself as a reluctant participator in my own story because it's not what I imagined, it's not what I dreamed, and therefore I didn't feel prepared.
Yes.
I write in the opening chapter actually that imposter syndrome is a real thing. It's not just a cool thing, it's a real thing.
Yeah.
And to this day, I would still wrestle with the identity, you know, when you get introduced at keynoting events and people describe you as an entrepreneur. I could barely spell the word, and I hardly imagined myself as one.
Yeah.
So I am an accidental success, whatever that means. And I think coming to terms with that is a really healthy thing. Like it almost took the pressure off when I realized, well, I'm not trained in business. I haven't called myself to this. I feel like this is just part of the purpose I'm meant to step into.
Yeah.
I will make more mistakes than get it right. That will be my university degree. You know, I'll learn by a series of costly and expensive mistakes. And I think at some point, and I can't tell you where, but at some point I think I just rested in the fact that it's going to be something I learn as I go.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah, and I think it happened, you know, because you'd find a gap, you know, you'd be like, oh, well, we've got to nut out this issue. And so it's like, well, it's up to us. We've got to somehow learn.
Necessity is the mother of invention.
I know. Yeah. And it was wonderful the day that you sort of grew large enough that you could actually afford to employ someone who knew how to do those things.
Yeah.
And so you slowly gave that up. But at the beginning, you have to be a master of all trades.
Yeah.
Just because
that's what it is.
Yeah. Just look at each other. Who can do it best? Who's got a bit more time, you know, and you handball it.
I think we got comfortable pretty quickly asking a lot of questions though.
Yeah.
So you get over yourself quite fast when you realise your house is on the line. You've already worked 14 hours that day. There's no blue sky. You know, the bright light in front is a freight train coming at you. You know, all the cliches. I think you learn to ask questions, and so we had good people in our corner who were happy for us to ask all the dumb questions. And I think I just keep asking them. Yeah. So I call that questioneering, the engineering of the right question to actually help you get out of the unstuck position. Yeah.
Yeah. A question for you, Pauls. One of the really kind of striking memories I have was I remember for a long period of time, you would record every expense. And I remember going hiking with you once, mate, and you bought a Mars bar or a Snickers bar or whatever, and you made a note of it because you recorded literally every expense that you had. And I remember being we were on holidays with you guys at one point, and it was funny to record all expenses. I remember buying ice creams and you recorded the expense. And I also recall, and this was at a point probably halfway through the journey when things were starting to kind of, you know, do really well, and we were pretty close, and I remember it kind of just came out in conversation. You guys were living on a quite restricted income, and you were frugal in the good sense of the word, as in you were squeezing every dollar out of it and making every dollar go as far as you could. And the reality was there was a lot of people on your payroll on higher salaries. There's no question, and probably living a little bit more comfortable at that time. And so, I'm what was that like?
Look, I think it started out of necessity initially.
Yeah.
And I think, Jace maybe came into our marriage having had a bit more, I guess, order in this area. And I was like, yeah, I'll go with it,
Mm.
And I think one of the things, there was a few drivers for it. One of it, which we learned over time, was we had no choice because we were literally for many years living off my nursing wage. I would work 3 12-hour shifts.
Yeah.
And that was my full-time work, and that was our income. And anything that came through the business stayed in the business so that we could then eventually employ someone else.
Yeah.
So I think, the fact that we didn't have a huge amount meant that it helped us by budgeting. I think a second driver was that over the years, as we grew and we could draw a bigger wage, was the challenge of knowing that our heart was to give.
Yeah.
So there were some causes and organizations that we felt really drawn to, that I was like, well, if I can be careful in this area, it frees up some funds, we can contribute. So I think that then became a bit of a driver.
Yeah.
And also, having come from, I've lived through seasons of wealth and poverty and, and not poverty. I've seen poverty now, I can't say that.
Yeah.
I've lived through seasons of wealth and, seasons where things are tighter.
Yeah.
I think, financial freedom can come if you live within your means.
Yes.
And I think that was something that we experienced with very little. We had this financial freedom because we just knew what we could spend. And when we spent, it wasn't, oh man, how are we going to pay the next bill? We knew we had an account for the bills, and the money for the bills were all allocated. And so we knew that was all covered. So when we spent, it was with freedom.
Yeah.
So I think there was a few of those things that, got us working and doing such meticulous. Over time, we had a bit more of, lax around that, but.
Do you remember the Jeep?
Yeah.
I remember you driving that thing till the wheels are going to fall off.
Yeah, we were dropping metalware on the road, like bits of the engine and drivetrain were literally falling off. I think it helps because we didn't go into business with a sense of intentionality.
Yeah.
We thought we were going to live in a grass hut in an undeveloped country, learning an unknown dialect, working amongst the poorest of the poor, and on our first date had committed to that kind of lifestyle.
Yeah. And
so even when we started to come into money, we never felt like it was our money.
Yeah.
We always felt like this was something to be responsible with and to steward well, that God had given us the means to earn it, but it was for other people. And so I guess that tension was there pretty well from the beginning.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to pick up a couple of questions that folks have sent through. Congratulations on your past success, including the book. Can you share with us the one most important learning or insight from your business and life experiences? So they're after the pinnacle learning here.
Yeah. Well, I go to an easy one. This gives you some thinking time. The overwhelming learning, and I'm a little embarrassed that it took me 22 years and writing a book and having to read it back and kind of reflect on to learn this, but nonetheless, my big learning is people matter more than tasks. I think I'm naturally, when I'm under pressure, when I'm stressed, when I'm feeling up against it, I'm structured, I'm disciplined, I'm all those things which are serve a purpose, a utilitarian purpose when it counts, but people still matter. And I think if I had my time to do it all over again, I would shift the balance. I wouldn't swing the pendulum, but I'd just shift the balance. I'd just edge the scales in the direction that Paul's would have coached me on for all of those 2 decades, and that is still make relationship the most important thing. And it isn't my instinct. It's something I've had to practice, rehearse, have accountability around. So that would be my biggest lesson. Yeah, really. Okay. Paul's, what would you throw in?
Really tough, because there's like 22 years of
Yeah,
continuous learning. So
Yes.
I think there's so many things. It's hard to pin one, but on the spot today because I've answered this previously and I was trying to think of my previous answer.
Yeah.
It changes depending on the context.
Yeah.
I think is sometimes we rush through life and we're looking at the next stage.
Yeah.
People tell you this about your kids. When you have little kids, oh, it's the best because it's so special. But you know, when you're in there, sometimes you're rushing through because the pressures of that day. But
Yeah.
just being more present in each season because each stage, you just can't go back
When
there.
they end, they're done.
When they end, they're done. And there are moments in time where you can just go, wow, this is the last time that I will do this.
Yeah.
And those moments, I reckon, are really special. So, but not because you're closing them, but because you're, I think, aware that, wow, I'm having, this is going to close. And so I think being appreciative of where you're at, which is really hard. It's nice sitting here at this completed end. We know that it's had a nice finish.
Yes.
It's easy to say. I know in the messiness of pain, that's a really hard place to sit too.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Okay. Yeah. Great. You asked me to ask you hard questions, so I'm gonna do that. Or you gave me permission to do that. And I think as we were mates through this process, I kind of observed that you probably had, 500 people that you kind of had a nice friendship with. You knew them. You had sort of 50 to 100 that you were really quite close with, and it was obvious last night and some of the other networks of yours that I know that there are some key people, and quite a number of them, that you really have quite deep sort of, lasting relationships and friendships with, and I know that really kind of means a lot to you. There were a few conflicts in the mix.
I felt like I knew where this question was
Not
going.
a lot of them, but I can remember, a handful where I was angry on your behalf.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And I was like, man, and I kind of felt that on your behalf. And so my question to you would be, how do you feel about those folk now?
Yeah, and there are a handful. There's like maybe half a dozen really tragic relationships in the book, in the story. And I worked really hard for 22 years never to tell my story. Yep. Like in the franchisee network, I just stayed silent when critics or people would go to social media and they would tell their version of events. I had always been counselled to, silence is the higher ground. Like don't engage in the fray. So I kind of stayed pretty solemn through all of that. And there's always two sides to a story, and this is my story. This is my side. So I've tried to tell my story without telling anybody else's story. I've tried to be fair. I've tried to be balanced. I've tried to own my mistakes, of which there are plenty. But there are at least half a dozen people who I think would probably cross to the other side of the street if they saw me coming out there at Westfields, and that bothers me. That's a regret. I feel if I had my time again, I would definitely do some things differently. And it's not because everything I did was wrong, or definitely everything I did was right, but it was just back to that idea that relationship matters. I felt tension. I felt tension between not setting precedent with people who would hold me to ransom in a franchise network that would then become unruly, with trying to show exceptions to people who had personal circumstances that needed some some sort of adaptation to the terms of the contract. And I reckon sometimes I got it right, but at least 6 of those times I got it wrong. Yeah. And I would just say, if those people are listening, and I think they'll definitely read the book. I would love to reconcile relationship. Like that would be for me the greatest outcome of the whole exercise. Yeah. And not because I expect them to fall on their sword, but because as adults we can accept these are complex. Business is complex. Yeah. There's a lot of moving parts. So how do I feel towards them? I actually feel good. I feel like I'd love to reconcile if there's some brokenness still out there. Around there, and I think this is in part a gesture of owning my bit, because I hope that comes through in some of those stories. Is that fair?
That's fair.
Yeah.
And that's your hard question, so.
And now Paulina wants a really hard question then.
Let me ask you a question, Paul, that I haven't asked yet. And this is just a bit of fun. If you had 3 lives you could live, and the decision to do all of this was yours solely alone to run this business, and how many of those lives would you say, yep, let's do it? And how many would you say, no, I'll pass?
Wow. With the end where we're sitting, I guess it's an easy, I would go for it again.
Yeah.
Because there was some really difficult patches.
Yeah.
But it's been an amazing journey and incredible way to close. Like it's something that we never thought would.
Yes.
Having said that, what the question really gets to is, would we really do this if we at the beginning?
Yeah.
Now, there were plenty of stages in the journey where I was like, this is not what I want to be doing.
Yeah.
I would have definitely, and I said it many times, stayed at one practice. I just done that well, enjoyed that community.
Yeah.
And I would have been a happy camper.
Yeah.
But I also do understand why the first one started.
Yes.
Like, you know, we just had this employee that we were like, we don't want to lose them. We've invested so much in them. Let's keep them by starting a second. So it was this subtle thing that drew us, but it wasn't this grand plan.
Yeah.
So there were plenty of seasons where I was like, this is not where I want to be.
This is not fun.
No,
Yeah,
but easy to say now with the finished product.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, we're getting some great questions in. And Jason, I know you'll be happy to answer them as well, but there's probably more than I'll get through, but some really good ones. And one of the questions is, what was your why at the beginning of this venture? And how did you keep in touch with that?
Yeah, well, the why was I need to pay the rent or the mortgage at that time in our life. We were only 2 years married. We were literally had made a trip to Cambodia just before we got married. We were desperately hoping to make a life in the third world. We wanted to be medical missionaries. It wasn't happening. It just wasn't happening.
Yeah.
And volunteer work doesn't pay very well. And we had commitments. And so I had sort of bombed out in a few of my first jobs.
Yeah.
And I felt totally inept. I had to contribute something to the coffers because Paulina was doing these 12-hour work shifts. So I started treating a few friends and family in the carport at home. My best man at my wedding, he kind of knocked together some facade walls.
Yeah.
And there we had a consulting room. And my why was not world domination. My why was not to build even an ethical business for the purposes of investing into the third world. My why was to pay the mortgage because we weren't going to do this for very long. And I needed to pull my weight. And then we were going to go overseas. And of course, you'll read the book, but it's not how it turned out. So something changed. And my why then, and there's a pretty defining moment, I won't give it away, but there is a really defining moment on our trip around Australia at 26 years of age where my why significantly changed.
Yes.
And I'll leave them hanging,
For that.
but you know, that gives you a little bit.
Before that, you were pretty motivated to like eat food and live indoors.
Yeah, I just wanted to make enough money to not embarrass myself at the kitchen table.
Yeah,
Because Paulina was the breadwinner.
Okay, great. Pauls, do you miss your nursing career?
There have been times where I have, but I think by the time I got to the stage of putting it down, I think I was ready.
Okay.
It was okay. I have had seasons post where I'm like, oh, would I do this? And I've looked at further studies and things. But
Yes.
I don't miss the night duty.
Yeah.
And I don't miss working public holidays, and that's when they really need you. So
Yeah.
I think we're just in a different season now.
Yeah.
And so put that to bed.
I know one of the big things for the two of you was the charity piece and sort of philanthropy and those sorts of things. Would that rate as kind of, as you look back and say, because we sort of hinted at some of the challenges, and there were clearly some, but there were some amazing highlights as well. Would that work, as you look back and go, actually that's the stuff that I felt had there was some real meaning in some of that. How does that play into the mix of your reflections?
I mean, look, I think that was a real privilege to do. It is a lot of work to run a charity, and you don't want to start one for the sake of it. But I think our heart behind it was to motivate and empower our workforce, to give them a taste of some of the things that we have experienced. and therefore to motivate their hearts to do good, whatever that looked like in their community.
Yes.
Whether it was giving time to the footy club or to, you know, a patient who came in who couldn't afford it, that they would have the open mind to do that, through to giving of their time and finances to other causes.
Yes.
And so that was part of the big heart behind SOS. We were like, we've got all these incredibly skilled, mostly pretty well financed people in the community who are pretty well supported and have an incredible steady base that if they can give out and if we can mobilize them, wow, that would be so powerful. So it was always such a beautiful thing to see so many people volunteering their time. We were very blown away and grateful for that.
And it's a helpful skill.
privilege.
Like it's a skill that,
Tremendous.
you know, it's a skill that helps.
And you know, we're supposedly the lucky country, but one of the key focuses of the first charity we founded, which is called the SOS Health Foundation, it was around Indigenous causes. And we're health practitioners, and closing the gap on healthcare issues is a significant issue. And so, you know, it wasn't just Paulina and me. You've touched on the fact that over 10 years, literally a decade, millions of dollars, not just our money, I mean, our franchisees, our workforce, our patients, our suppliers would give, you know, gifts in kind. Like a lot of people actually contributed to move the needle in some of those communities which really are on par with some of the most impoverished parts of the world.
Yes.
And this is in Australia.
Yeah, this is an out.
And so I'm very proud of that. So if the question is, you know, were they the highlights? Well, they were some of the most rewarding and fulfilling aspects.
Yeah.
And speaks to a little bit of the why question that you asked previously, because it kind of put fuel in the tank again. Let's keep scaling, because another practice represents more impact,
capacity,
more impact in some of these communities.
And, you know, SOS Foundation did lots of different things. It wasn't just an Indigenous community.
Yeah.
We did a lot of work on the marginalised in the homelessness space, and there was lots of it, but it really kind of changed and morphed. So
yeah, and it did. It sort of evolved as you kind of went through. I want to ask about the spiritual aspect of your business experience. And you write in the book that for a long time you felt like this whole thing was kind of God's temporary assignment before becoming a medical missionary. And indeed, that's you call the book Unlikely as kind of the premise for that. And you certainly weave your Christian faith and experiences through lots of different pieces of the book. And to make it interesting, I want to frame these questions from the perspective of a non-religious person. And so, we all know that your story has a happy ending. And that's kind of why we're here tonight. But parts of that were not fun at all. I remember as your mate, there were times when you couldn't remember people's names. You actually lost the ability to remember. And I remember there was other times when you were so stressed, you actually lost your peripheral vision. And it's like you couldn't see out of your periphery. And you've got a stronger medical background than I do, but it doesn't take a genius to figure out that's not a good way to be. There were some really kind of pretty hard and sort of a few pretty dark moments in that kind of mix. You talk about a loving God and those sorts of things. Where's a loving God in that mix?
Yeah. So it was a decision how to tell the story as to whether to include the faith element, the God aspect or not, because I realise it's deeply personal.
Yeah.
And so if I try and answer this question from a non-religious perspective as well, which sounds contradictory, but I think is possible, I would say it would be totally unauthentic to write about Back in Motion and not recognise that for me, this person called Jason, that there was a belief in a God and a purpose in what he was doing, because it really is inseparable to the commercial elements. And when I get to these real low points of physically being unwell and stressed and legal entanglements, and Paulina suggesting maybe we've gone as far as we should go, I had to kind of make the decision again, is God real? Like, did I make this up?
Yeah.
Or actually, is there a purpose beyond myself? Am I called to this? Is this what I'm meant to do? Like, not just a good idea. Am I compelled to do this, even if it costs me everything? And at each of those real low points, I keep
Yeah.
coming back to the fact that God is with me.
Yeah.
He does love me. He did make me. He's not that interested in a national physiotherapy network, but he is totally interested in forming my character, in building my dependency on him, in helping me grow into the person he intends me to be. And so it wasn't really about physiotherapy, that aspect. That aspect was about Jason becoming more whom God created me to become. And so I had a conviction around that.
Yeah.
I can't deny it.
Yeah.
Even if I don't have all the pretty words to put around it, it was a really strong central element of my conviction.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think the challenging thing and the balance to it is that absolutely I feel God was there.
Yeah.
I think that those were minor things compared to what could have happened to his health.
Yes.
So I think the challenge for me was I felt like that they were warning signals that Jace was just doing too much.
Yeah.
And so it was this constant tension of having to be like, nah, you've got to cut more out. Yes, I know the opportunities are there. And so I think that's where God gets the blame. It shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Like, it's not his
Sometimes
fault.
Jason did it to himself.
Yeah.
Like,
Maybe
really?
you're discovering you're not the savior of the
Yeah,
world.
exactly. Like
Yeah.
you do not have infinite knowledge. You are not God.
Yeah.
I think that, I think because with every person who achieves,
Yeah.
that drive is both their strength, but it's also their weakness. All
Yes.
of our personalities have strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah.
And when you are so driven, unfortunately, you don't listen to your body.
Yeah.
So
that you can drive to burnout.
You can drive to burnout. And
Yeah.
so I actually, to me, I saw those moments, even though it was painful, because it meant that I was picking up a whole lot more. Just put more pressure on me and family and everyone around us.
Yeah.
But I just saw those as God's hand of saying, come on,
It's
warning
protecting
sign, protecting you.
us.
Yes.
Yeah.
Your body
Yeah.
trying to say, come on, too
Yeah.
much.
Yeah.
And would he listen?
Yeah. Okay.
And I do say, mate,
And
when
you
God,
do some-
I do say when God and your wife gang up on you,
Yeah.
you have no
it's time,
chance.
It's time
Like,
to listen.
it's an unwinnable
Yeah.
debate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I can understand that the Bible, like other religious texts, kind of provides a moral framework that we suggest we should live by. But as I read the book, it seemed that your decision-making processes went kind of a long way beyond trying to live by good morals. And indeed, you talk about being directed by God in a far more interventionist way. And so my question is, again, from the frame of a non-religious person, the thought of kind of active spiritual direction from folks that are otherwise incredibly logical and strategic and all of that, that's unusual. And so, how did that work?
Yeah, look, I don't know how that works. It's very hard to explain and experience. Spirituality is by definition very personal.
Yes.
But I would say it isn't religion. It's not organized religion. It's not predetermined prayers. It's not reading, a certain passage of scripture and hoping that fixes everything. Actually, the God you're kind of describing is the God I met as a 10-year-old boy.
Yeah.
And I felt like he was a person. He did talk to me. I know it sounds weird. And now, if nothing else, read the book for curiosity, because I actually think those were some of the most real experiences of my life.
Yeah.
And at my real high points.
Yeah.
And clearly at the low ones, I would feel like he's in those moments, either showing his pleasure and excited for what he enabled in us.
Yes.
And then at the low points, I feel like he's totally there saying, well, the pain is real too. And he had something to say. So I don't know. I just say it's not that religious.
Yeah.
It is a God who I feel is as personal as my wife sitting next to me.
Yeah.
And that
to your credit, it doesn't come off religious either, actually.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And I think that, God speaking to us over the years in different ways is really varied.
Yeah.
Like it can be from discussions, at a board level that you just like the collective wisdom of the room. You're like, in that you find, you're like, yeah, that kind of
Confirmation.
aligns.
Yes.
with, what godly values might be, or that might align with, a thought that I had that I just wasn't sure whether I want to kind of really go with.
Yes.
So it can be from something practical like that through to, I don't know, it might be. Yeah, it might be a
Something
dream
you read, something somebody else says to us,
yeah.
and we experience it differently.
Yeah. So I think it really varies, but it's just this deep sense that you're like, I'm going to back that idea.
Yes.
Maybe it wasn't an idea that I had,
Yeah.
and it's different to what my norm is, but it's kind of this sense with this piece, with that. It's like, it's so different.
Yeah.
I'm going to give it a go.
That's out of the ordinary.
And so that's that. It can be like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the best I can describe.
Great.
But it varies.
Yeah. Hey, in a few moments, we're going to finish up with a fun little thing with some just fast Q&A. But before we do that, you can certainly order your copy of Unlikely now on Amazon or from Jason's website. And again, happy to have it signed if that's something that you'd like. There isn't an audio version yet, but if you're like me, I like audio, so we just need to nag you to do that 5 days in the audio booth. We would love to hear your feedback, and I know a lot of people watching really are close friends. And if you know anything about social media and Amazon algorithms, interaction is the most important thing. And so a comment, some feedback, those sorts of things, help us out. Share, do all of those things, and that really does give it a boost. We got some great questions tonight. I'll certainly share those with you. But if you didn't get your question answered tonight and you wanted to, just info@jasontsmith.com.au, and Jason's actually happy to engage.
Yes,
that's no problems at all. But before I call it good night, let's do our little one-word answer.
Okay.
One word.
One word. How you felt at different points. Okay. How did you feel, Paulina? Start with you. The day you decided you wanted to sell, you made the decision.
Terrified.
Totally relieved.
Okay. The day you told all the franchises that you were selling. Jace?
Terrified.
Still terrified.
5 minutes before you went in to pitch the business to the most likely buyers, the biggest sale of your life, how did you feel? Direct this one to Jay.
Unprepared.
Okay. Paulina, when you got the first round of offers through.
Yeah. Blown away.
Yeah.
Overwhelmed.
Okay. The day you shook hands on a deal, but you hadn't gone through due diligence. So it's like you've said yes to one party, but DD's is about to begin. Pauls?
Still scared.
Okay.
We're married.
Yeah.
We're engaged. That's how I felt.
Okay. The day that the contracts went unconditional. So DD is over, price is sorted, the day that's done. How are you feeling, Pauls?
I hope we can get all the franchisees on board.
That's right. Yeah, because it was a multi-part journey. Yeah.
Convinced. I felt convinced at that point.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. Jace, the day money landed in your bank account.
Strangely, a little indifferent because I didn't think it was our money to spend.
Okay.
Yeah.
Pauls?
Wowed.
Yeah.
Relieved.
Yes.
Relieved.
Yeah.
Relieved because I felt like that was okay. It's real now.
Yeah.
That was when I crossed the line.
Yeah. It's really happening when money's in the
really
bank.
Happening.
Yeah, it's real. Okay.
Before that, it was all tenuous.
Jace, today as you reflect on the deal.
Grateful. Absolutely grateful.
Yeah. Pauls?
Yeah. Blown away to have had the privilege, I guess, as we look back, to have had the journey.
Yeah.
Just from the people we've met, the experiences we've had, I feel really humbled that, we're pretty just two kids.
Yeah.
Factory gully. What we're, actually we're glad
we're a little older now. So.
No, but once upon a time, I just think of all the people that took risks in joining our group. Working for us, suppliers that we deal with, the family, the people that invested into us personally to support us. I just feel really blown away. It's hard to believe that, that we were part of this story, and Yeah, it really is an unlikely outcome. At one point, we thought we'd have this, for good, that once we got
It was a
this,
forever business.
it was a forever, because you've gotten so big, we're like, how can we move this on? Like,
Yeah.
we tried putting a CEO in place, and
Yeah.
not to his fault, but to our poor management, that didn't work, like, we tried to get
She's
out of
getting
it so
away
many
with a lot more
times.
than one word.
Yeah, she is.
I didn't realise the
Yeah, we've stretched it. Hey,
So yeah, I broke that word. It's hard to sum that up into one
Yeah.
word. But
Yeah. Yeah, good.
Thankful.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Jace, any last comments for someone who finds themselves in an unlikely story?
I think there's an unlikely possibility in us all. I really do. And we're just some evidence for that. So I would just encourage you, between every mountain peaks, there's a valley. It's just part of the journey. So stay on it, stay with it, take great people with you. I just encourage the unlikely in us all.
Good. Excellent. Enjoy the book, folks, and we'll wrap it up there. Thanks heaps, guys.